Kia ora koutou, we'll just make a start. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hia ke ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, ti hei Māori ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. No mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui. Te iwi o rangatane, tēnā koutou. Te konehira o Papaoia, tēnā koutou. E nā mana e nā reo, nā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to this meeting of Community Development Committee. I'd like to acknowledge that it's Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, and also that it's 50 years today since the presentation of the Māori language petition, which inspired Māori language rights in this country. So I think it's a very important day and needs to be recognised. I'd just like to go through some housekeeping. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on Council's YouTube channel. The health and safety requirements for the chamber are on the screens. Fire and emergency, if there's an alarm, please leave the site by the nearest fire exit and evacuate to the clock tower in Te Maraeohine. Smoking is prohibited. The defibrillator is located on the ground floor front of house. And if there are any near miss or incidents, please report to the committee administrator. If you're an online participant, please keep your camera turned on and your microphone muted unless addressing the meeting. And I believe we've got Councillor Renee Dingwall online at the moment. Councillors in person vote using the voting device, and councillors online to vote in the chat, please. If you are presenting, please give your name before speaking and use the microphone. We will move first of all to apologies. So I've had apologies from Danielle Harris, Councillor Finlay for early departure, and Councillor Leonie Harpiter. Are there any other apologies? Nope. Okay, so I'll move that the apologies be accepted. Seconded, Councillor Bowen, and we'll vote, please. Councillor Bowen is the seconder. Thank you. Okay, should be able to vote now, thank you. And that's carried 15 votes for and none against. Now, I've had no notification of additional items. Are there any additional items? No, sorry. Okay. Just fire. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Beattie. Okay, Councillor Beattie, item number 5. Councillor Finlay.
On number 8, and I'll join the deputation.
Okay, item number 8.
And I'll join the deputation.
And you'll join the deputation. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Those are noted. So that brings us on to public comment. And today we have public comment from the Palmerston North Surf Lifesaving Club. So I'd like to welcome Kate Dench and Phil Neville to come and address us, please. So welcome, Phil and Kate. Just remind you to turn your microphones on, and then you'll have 3 minutes for public comment, followed by any questions. Just maybe you might need to bring your microphone down so that we can hear you. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. When you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Kate Dench from the Palmerston North Surf Lifesaving Club, and I'm joined here by Phil Neville. Palmerston North Surf Life Saving Club has been providing a voluntary lifeguard service to Palmerston North and surrounding communities at Himitangi Beach since 1947. We are in our 75th year. The volunteer lifeguard service is delivered on weekends from December through to March. In addition, the club trains and qualifies lifeguards, does IRB, trains and qualifies IRB drivers, patrol captains and patrol teams. It also runs a junior surf program, which is for our emerging future lifeguards, and also runs a beach education program through the schools. The club spends an enormous amount of time fundraising for operations, equipment and facilities. The regional lifeguard paid service runs for 6 weeks, from Monday to Friday, from December to the end of January. This has been jointly funded by Palmerston North City Council and the Manawatu District Council. This is what our application is for. Looking at the stats for the regional paid lifeguard service over the last 10 years, there has been a total of 58 rescues, over 5,000 preventative actions at the beach, and it has involved over 20,000 people. The focus for the lifeguard service is to engage people before they get into trouble, engage with people before they get into trouble, and to educate people who are at the beach on how to stay safe and swim between the flags. A budget for the regional paid lifeguard service at Himitangi Beach has been presented, and it involves employing 3 lifeguards for 6 weeks, and the budget for each year is $29,254, for which we are asking $14,254 each year for the next 2 years from the Palmerston North City Council. The club has been successful in securing a $15,000 per year for the next 3 years from the Manawatu District Council. So I am happy to take any questions on our application.
Thanks very much, Kate. First question is from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming in. I think my question was triggered by the staff report that sits with this. I hope you've seen that, but I think you will be the one to answer it rather than staff, which was, I wondered if you could help me understand what went wrong with the funding. So you'd come through our fee-for-service fund for 3 years, and then you had a one-off grant, and I wasn't clear from the report why that separate full source of funding had been sought, and then you kind of dropped off the radar. So can you just explain that to me?
So we weren't, yes, we missed the funding round last year, and the reason we missed it was we weren't on a register, effectively. So the fee-for-service funding round, which we got 6 years ago, or thereabouts, somehow we fell off that register, and we have missed the round for last year. Yeah, then we got a one-off $30,000 one, and then we because we went on the register, we in the mailing list, we missed out on the application.
So it would have been your intention to apply?
Yes, it was definitely our intention to apply for that fund, and it was in our mind, but by the time we realised, we had missed the deadlines and weren't able to get in on the round.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Kate. Yes, Kate and Phil, Can you just advise us kind of how many years out of the 75 the City Council has supported?
I think it's 8 to 10 years. So we had some, before we got into the fee for service 6 years ago, we also managed to get a couple of one-off years. So prior to that, it was just funded by the Manawatu District Council. And then with restraints on their budget, approximately 10 years ago, that's when we approached the City Council to see if we can get joint funding. And we have, been successful for that.
It'd be fair to say the majority of users of the beach there are from the city?
Yeah, so the beach is in the Manawatu district, Hamatangi, but the majority of users obviously come from Palmerston North.
Thank you. Could you just shed a little bit of light on the financial position of the group, i.e. if this funding was not realised, what other options would you have?
So if this funding wasn't realised, so the club is based on his volunteers. It gets some funding from Surf Life Saving New Zealand, which is, we are affiliated to. It gets funding from them for our operations, for providing equipment, for operating our club rooms, training, lifeguards, uniforms, etc. The club has some reserves, but not a lot. And if we weren't successful with this fund, we would have to look at having a reduced paid lifeguard service Monday to Friday at the beach. So over the busy summer period, we would look at reducing the period we would be on the beach.
Thank you. And finally, I was interested in your presentation, Kate. You mentioned 5,000 preventative actions over, it seemed like a reasonable short number of years. Could you just share with us what a preventative action is?
Yes, we record, our lifeguards at the end of each day record whether it's a rescue, which is where someone's in serious trouble, and we have to either pull them from the water or do medical assistance. But our preventative action can be anyone from if they're in slight trouble in what we call the trough, which is a period of the water where it goes quite a bit deeper, we will obviously assist them out of that, or a lot of first aids on the beach during the season are quad bike accidents, SUVs, those sort of things. So that we call those preventative or medical assists.
Great, thank you.
Versus a save.
And just remind, the 5,000 was over how many years? 10, wow, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of my questions have been answered, but I was just, I guess, also wondering around the financial side of things. With it, I was just wondering what proportion is this 29K over your out of your overall funds that you have at the moment? I had a quick look at the charity's website, and I didn't see a return for the last couple of years, so it's hard to gauge how much.
Right. There should have been a return in there. But the 29,000 would be approximately 30%.
And with that, did you, forgive me if I've missed this, I'm a bit forgetful these days, but did you put a submission into the long-term plan at all?
Not this year, no.
Okay. And my other question was around the, so with COVID having such an impact on the organisation over the last couple of years, has that made a difference to, I guess, it's hard to say without looking at it, but has that made a difference at all to your financial situation? How does it compare? Or,
It hasn't had a financial impact because we still had funding last year for the paid lifeguard service, and we were able to continue to operate because the period was in the summer when there were less restrictions, although we did lose some of our volunteers through COVID, through the vaccine mandates, etc. And we did manage to get a small amount of what I call COVID funding from various the Sport New Zealand Fund for not last year, the year before.
okay. Thank you. That's all my questions. Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions around, further to Councillor Bowen's question, really. So you said in response to her question that you had missed the funding round for the strategic priority grants. So did you miss the round in 2019 and in 2022? Yes. So at what point were you made aware that the fee for service funding had been replaced with the strategic priority grant process?
I think we only became completely aware of that in about December last year when we realised we'd missed the round. Yeah.
So was December last year too late for the 2022 to 25 round?
I think it was, sorry, I just haven't got the timing because I wasn't doing the application, but yeah, when we realised we had missed the deadline for the round, I'm sure it closed in November 2021.
Okay.
Yes.
And what was the one-off grant of 30,000 in 2019? What was that for?
It was because we had not, we had missed I hadn't made an application for the previous 3 years, and we were given a special grant from the council for the funding of our lifeguard service.
Okay, and just further to Councillor Barrett's question around what impact this would have if you weren't funded, what's your current reserves?
We have approximately $40,000 in reserves, and so that is used to assist with equipment, running a clubhouse, and with supporting our lifeguard training program.
Okay, thank you.
That's it for questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, Kate and Phil. So I'll advise you just take a seat in the public gallery. Thank you. So we'll resolve that the public comment be received for information. I'm happy to move that, and Councillor Bowen will second it. Councillor, if you can just save any comments until after the staff item, I think that would be most useful. Thank you. So we will just vote to receive public comment at this stage. Thanks. That's carried unanimously, thank you. So now we'll have item 5, which is a memo from the Community Development Manager around the request for support from Palmerston North Surf Life Saving Club. So welcome Stephanie Velvin, who's Community Development Manager.
Kia ora koutou, ko Stephanie Velvin toku ingoa, Community Development Manager. This is the report outlining the request from the Surf Life Saving Club following on from their public comment today. This request is being brought forward in accordance with section 5.4.4a of the Support and Funding Policy 2022 for a final decision by Council. It provides comment on the 3 considerations at section 5.4.4a and presents 2 options, either fund the request or do not fund the request. It also provides a recommendation that support for the Palmerston North Surf Life Saving Club is considered in the next 10-year plan deliberations. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'll just open up for any questions. Mr. Mayor, you were in the queue, and was that for a comment on the previous item?
No, it'll be a little bit later, but that's
Okay.
fine. I don't have any questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. So, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stephanie. I just wanted to seek your comment on how this funding request has got out of whack with our procedures over the years. How do we find ourselves in this position?
My understanding is that somehow the club has missed the advertising, that the strategic priority grants round has been open both times, both recent rounds, which has led to them missing out on funding both times.
And obviously they'd applied under the fee-for-service rules and been successful under those conditions. What would be, this is a hard question to answer, but what would have been the likelihood of them being successful in strategic priority grants?
That is a difficult question to answer because there's a whole assessment process that involves a full panel of staff. They would have been eligible. They've met the criteria to apply. But then obviously there's a prioritisation because the fund is oversubscribed. Yeah.
So on average, when people apply to strategic priority grants, what kind of percentage of what they apply for do they get, bearing in mind that that fund is oversubscribed?
Oh, I don't have that figure to hand, sorry.
Do they get 100% of what they apply for?
No. We didn't fund anyone at 100% this last round. Yep.
Thank you.
Question from me, Stephanie. So with this strategic priority grant funding, there's a reporting obligation. But with the one-off grants, is there any reporting obligation?
With the recent one-off grant that was given, there were no reporting obligations.
And if we were to fund this request now, would there be any reporting obligation with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. Can I understand, we've got essentially a cover letter outlining and a basic budget. What sort of other additional information is required when we have an application process that you need? Would this be the type of information that you would have, or do you expect some other outcomes or reserves being declared and things like that? Can I just understand what would be required?
It depends on the fund, the type of grant that's being applied for. So this application where this information came from was for the Community-Led Initiatives Fund, and so it's a little bit lighter in terms of what's required to be provided. For the strategic priority grants, yes, we require financials to be provided for the organisation, and the organisation needs to set out what outcomes they're going to align with and how they're going to achieve those and measure those.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are almost all answered, aside from, I guess, what happens with the applicants who apply for the strategic priority grants and are unsuccessful? Do they have an opportunity to speak to council in this kind of a way?
I believe because they were declined, they wouldn't be able to use this part of the policy. The intent is for where they don't meet the criteria, which isn't the case for those that are declined from the strategic priority grants. But they could always come and talk in a presentation or another opportunity.
Yes, I'll leave the rest for comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Michelad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on that question from Councillor Dingwall, I just want to find out, is there an appeal process for candidates, for example, who have had their applications declined? Because what I'm seeing, or what I'm noticing, is probably a trend. Last time we had another group coming in saying that their priority grants were, they applied for this kind of funding and the application didn't meet the criteria, and then they came to council and asked for more funding or to approve of a certain funding. But is there an appeal process? For example, let's say if an application fails, what's the final end? What's the process around that?
There's no appeal process.
Thanks, Councillor. Could you just move your microphone a bit closer? You were a little hard to hear. Thank you. Okay, there are no further questions. Thank you, Stephanie. Oh, sorry. There's a late question from Councillor Naylor.
Sorry, I thought I'd put myself in the queue. Thanks for the report. Just a couple of questions. In terms the presentation, there was a register mentioned, and that perhaps that they'd been left off the register. Is there a register where previous, people who have received fee for service or strategic priority grants are sent some sort of reminder? And if so, have they been left off, or what? Can you provide some clarity to give us some better understanding about that?
We don't have a register per se, but there are certainly email networks that we utilise, and that was part of our strategy for advertising when the strategic priority grants were open last year. I can't speak for what happened in between the fee-for-service and the strategic priority grants. That was a fair few years ago. But based on what happened with this last round, we did make sure we communicated with all our current recipients so that they knew that that application was open.
So would Surf Life Savings Club have received one of those emails?
They didn't receive an email in this most recent period.
And what about the 2019 one? Oh, you don't know about that one. Sorry, you've said. Okay. And just in terms of a later report with the $2.4 million that is allocated annually, so the report says that there are no other, am I correct in understanding that none of the other funds that the Surf Life Saving Club would be eligible to apply for within the scope of those funds? So in 3.2, where is it? 3.4, sorry, it says there are no other funding programs within which this request can reasonably be considered. So in terms of the criteria, is it only the SPG funding that would potentially have met the criteria for which they're wanting funding?
Correct, yeah.
And so the next opportunity is not for another 3 years for them to do that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry to come into the queue really late. But look, I just really want to just make sure that we've got this really clear. Paragraph 4.2, can you just confirm that there's no need for any additional budget to be found? The budget for this would actually be found out of existing community development budget?
Correct. For this financial year, due to how things are tracking and with the relatively small amount of the request, we're satisfied that for this year we will have sufficient savings in the community development budget.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thanks, Madam Chair.
The Deputy Mayor.
No, I was just staring. I took myself out.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's great. So I'm happy to move recommendation 1A, which is that Council fund the request of $14,627 per annum for 2 years. And obviously then recommendation 2, we'll just need to delete probably. Do we need to delete it? if the decision is. So maybe we'll just speak to one first and vote on that, and then if it passes, then we'll do two. I'll seek a seconder, the Mayor. I'll speak first to this as the mover. I think it's important that despite our attempts to have good process and fairness in terms of allocation of funding, that we retain a little flexibility for organisations like the Surf Life Saving Club that have unfortunately not applied in time or for whatever circumstance haven't got their application. It is, I think, very important, particularly in the light of the drownings that occurred at the river last year, that we do what we can to prevent accidents in water, whether they be river or sea, for our community. So I'm confident that Surf Life Saving will understand the process in future and be able to apply through the regular channel. But I do think it's important to retain the flexibility for important community needs. So I'd ask you to support this, please. Mr. Mayor, did you want to speak as a seconder?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's really unfortunate that it's fallen through the cracks, and we sort of, I suppose we're still getting to reasons why, but despite pretty rigorous funding processes in place. This is the only surf club from a city without a beach. Think about that. You know, the name of the organisation is the Palmerston North Surf Life Saving Club. So it's a city club. It's a past winner of regional community awards, and you know has a real proud history of 75 years, and many outstanding surf lifesavers, including Olympian Ian Ferguson, have come from that club. But like Madam Chair, the mover of the recommendation, I do think we should be supporting this. We've supported them in the past, and we actually funded, I was a brand new councillor when we funded the Capital program for their new club rooms and surf life-saving facilities there at Himatangi Beach. And we did that because the city deemed it, and that council of the day deemed it as part of our city. It was one of our clubs. It was one of our facilities. It's also a future-focused club. I think they perhaps undersell themselves a bit about their really strong junior and youth section. And yeah, I really commend them for what they do in that space. So councillors, I think this is a no-brainer to support. I can understand it doesn't fit the process, but actually, I'm sorry, the process is out the window today. We have to support this. And our partners at MDC have. And I encourage the officers just to reconnect a little bit there around the future rounds of funding. It probably does highlight there are some little gaps there if you're not in the know or you're not on a database. But in my opinion, this absolutely is a strategic service for our city. So please support it. Thank you.
Councillor Michelada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to support the funding request for this. First of all, it's a small amount, so it's a small ask. And the second reason why I wanted to actually support this is because of the impact. I mean, the implications of not supporting this are just great in terms of reducing the safety for users in our city. I mean, yes, it's true, it's Himatangi Beach, but a lot of the people actually who are using the beach come from Palmerston North. And that's one of the reasons why I'll be supporting this. The second reason, or third reason, is probably the reputational risk to us as a council or the organisation, especially given the drownings that happened over the summer. I know those 3 people that drowned, or those people that drowned during the summer last year or the beginning of the year, and I've worked with one of them. So this is a bit personal to me, and so those are the reasons why I'll be doing that, and also due to the fact that the council has recently committed to water safety improvement at the Manawatu River. So I'm very much happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to support this, interestingly. I'm a massive advocate for community, and I really do want to acknowledge the work that Surf Lifesaving does and the massive impact that they have on our community. But this isn't the first time that they have missed a deadline to fill in a funding application form. This is the second time. And the first time that happened, they were given a one-off special grant of $30,000. If I was in an organisation in that position, I would have made sure that I knew what was happening rather than waiting on organisations to get in touch with me. And so I guess I'm looking at this and I have quite a few concerns. I'm concerned about the fact that if they've gone through a proper application process with staff would be able to talk to them about things like their financial position and, you know, what's going on there, rather than the limited budget information that we have. I tried to look them up on the charities website, and I haven't seen a return there since 2019. And in there, you know, there's a whole bunch of questions that I would have asked if I had been the funding officer on the other side of the table. But, you know, the officers haven't really been given that kind of a opportunity to assess this alongside all of the other really great applications that we get in this city. I'm concerned about the fact that it might seem to be easier to not bother to apply for funding and go through proper channels and just come and talk to council. I feel like that's a really dangerous precedent that we could be setting. We have this funding, we've set up this funding system for a reason, and that is to avoid people just coming and asking us directly. And I feel like if we're able to have those more in-depth conversations, then we would be able to assess accurately whether this amount is justified or not. And I'm not saying that I know whether it's justified or not, because I think that they're doing a great job. My issue is I don't have the full picture. I don't have all of the information. And I'm really hesitant to go down this road with them. They do have reserves that they could fall back on, and maybe they could apply to come and speak to us during an annual budget or long-term plan thing, and we could set something else up. But I think this off the just system is not working for me, and my dog is barking, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have a lot of sympathy with the views that Councillor Dingwall has just expressed. I have concerns about the process we find ourselves in here. I think she's absolutely right that we run a risk of opening a back door, that there are unintended consequences at a policy level of taking this kind of action. And I'm also very mindful of our heavily oversubscribed strategic priority grant process, where people go through a very rigorous application and interview process. Nobody gets everything they asked for, and that's often difficult, and as Councillor Michelad explored in his question, there is no appeal against those decisions, whether you're successful or unsuccessful. So I absolutely share some of those concerns. However, taking a pragmatic approach to this, often processes fall over. Sometimes things go wrong. It's very unfortunate that the Surf Lifesaving Club have found themselves having their processes fall over twice, and I would encourage them strongly to make sure that doesn't happen a third time. But those things happen, and they happen sometimes because organisations are heavily volunteer-based and don't have the systems and processes in place that as council we like to think that people do, but the reality is they just don't sometimes. So I am happy to fund the request. I'd prefer to fund it for 1 year rather than 2, but that's going to come through the annual budget next year, and we can have that conversation again at that time. Surf Lifesaving, I'd encourage you to come and talk to us in that process. but I'd be happy to support them going forward this year, even with all of those concerns. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, some things I'm prepared to do once, I suppose, and this is one of those, which is to make sure that there is continuity for this group. But I'd be most disappointed if this were to become a frequent or commonly used path. It must not become that, because we would end up being a council with loose ends across all the different sectors looking for extra scraps of funding, and we need one process, but we do also need to have some empathy around times when groups that have delivered extraordinary service over a long, long period of time and are highly reliant on a voluntary base can be supported once in these cases where they are faced with some challenges in terms of changing process on our end, and perhaps some changes on their end as well that have meant that they've unfortunately found themselves slipped through a crack. So I'm happy to support once, but would encourage that club and all clubs in the city to be very, very mindful of watching council process and funding rounds and being part of the process rather than trying to become the exception.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I do think that the work of the Surf Life Savings Club is extremely valuable. There's no denying that. But I also think that the issues that Councillor Dingwall raised, I share her concerns and have similar concerns. Councillor Barrett has just also suggested that he would be concerned if this became a frequent or commonly used path. I think if we say yes to everything that's being asked of us here, it's very likely that this would become a frequent and commonly used path, because the message that this sends to other community organisations who have either been unsuccessful through the strategic priority grant process or have happened to not had the administrative discipline to actually apply, or forgotten, or it's been missed in some way, what we will see is more and more of these requests come to council. So I would like to say, consider what may have been the outcome if they'd put a strategic priority grant application in. It's clear that those who did get their applications in did not receive all of what they asked for. So I'd like to move an amendment to the option 1 request, amendment to make it 8,000 per annum for 2 years, and Councillor Dingwall has indicated that she'd be happy to second that.
Just give us a minute while the administrators get that on the screen, please, Councillor. Change. Okay, just while we're getting that sorted out, would you like to speak to your amendment, Councillor Naylor?
I think I have spoken to it, really. My reasons for a reduced amount is to support the work. It's still to say yes to the important work that the Surf Life Saving Club are doing, but it's acknowledging that it wouldn't be appropriate. I guess the other thing to add to that really is that part of the rationale for the strategic priority grant process to be set up is to create an objective process and an unpoliticised process. And my concern if we set out, if the message that we send out there, that there is a way of bypassing that objective and unpoliticised process, is to not put an application in but bring it to the council at a later date, then I don't think that retains the integrity of the strategic priority grant process, which I think is really important for that to be fair to the community. And particularly it needs to be fair to those groups in our community who have actually had a declined application. So I realise there's no perfect way to address all of those issues, but this is my attempt to try and find a fairer way forward for the request that's in front of us.
Councillor Dingwall is the seconder. Did you want to speak?
No, I'm happy with those comments, thank you.
Okay. I'll make a comment on the amendment, and councillors, if you've spoken once, that's not a problem. We'll now open up again to speak on the amendment. So I won't be supporting the amendment. I think that the ask from Surf Life Saving is not a large ask, and it can be accommodated within the current budgets. I understand the concerns that have been expressed around lack of competitive process, etc. But I'm not really sure that trying to save $6,000, which will put the club in difficulty given the very small operating budget that they have, I'm not really sure what the purpose of that is, other than to somehow punish the club for not getting an application in. And so I'm really not prepared to support it. I think it's much more important, councillors, that we see the bigger picture here, which is about water safety for our community. So I won't be supporting the amendment. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just firstly, I think the amendment needs to be adjusted because that's factually incorrect. There was no request of $8,000, and so I think the words request or fund the request of just need to be removed so that it would be funding $8,000.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point.
That's my first point.
Naylor? Yeah.
Just my second point, and I was jumping in and out of the queue as people were sort of making good comments in regards to the original recommendation. I'm not going to support the amendment. I think what we've heard is a genuine mistake, and whilst it did happen twice, it's still just a genuine mistake. We have put a lot of work into our SPG process, and it is reasonably robust, but we don't want to be so strict with our processes that we remove the ability to respond to our community's needs. And 3 years is a long time between funding rounds. So I am happy to support this. I don't want us to establish ourselves as a council who are preventing the community to come to us when they need something, and we have the ability to respond. So, yeah, I can't see this. I can't see this happening again. I am happy to support the original recommendation, and I'll be opposing the amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Like you, this is a genuine mistake. I mean, these people haven't even had a chance to come to us. They've missed databases, and frankly, to criticise volunteers that miss something, I think we've got to be careful we don't become so inflexible. We almost become elitist that I mean, this is silly. This is really silly. People have died in our rivers, and we've got a 75-year-old volunteer organisation pleading to us to help, and we're now starting to muck around. This is ridiculous. Seriously, we've got to move on and vote for the substantive. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I don't really understand by changing the amount, that doesn't address the principles around the fact that this organisation actually didn't apply on time. So it's trifling and quite frankly, quite absurd. So, and they've provided us with a budget. So I just won't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask a question to the mover or the?
Yes.
Yeah. Is this 8,000 based on any evidence or just halving the?
The question was asked of the percentage overall of what was allocated through the strategic priority grants of what was applied for, and I can't, and the officer couldn't remember off the top of her head, but from my recollection, I think it was somewhere between half to 2/3. I could be wrong. Someone might, the chair may have better recollection, but the report that came, I thought it was around a half to 2/3 of what people applied for. They were granted through that process.
Thank you. Aren't we setting a precedent if we do this, Next time, if somebody needs 14,000, they should put 28,000 request.
Are you asking me that?
Yes.
I think that is a common thing that happens with funding applications. It's a strategic thing that organisations do. They ask for more so that they can get more, yes. But I don't think there's anything we can really do about our processes to prevent that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't see any scientific reasoning behind this halving the money, so I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that the reason why I seconded the 8,000 as a figure was because the last time this organisation made that mistake, we gave them 10,000 per annum for 3 years. And so now I'm saying 8,000. Please don't make the mistake again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right. Councillor Naylor, right of reply?
Yeah, thank you. I do want to respond to a few comments that people have made. I certainly am not proposing this amendment to punish the club. I actually support them getting some funding. What I'm suggesting this amount is so that we're not rewarding the club for not having gone through the proper process. And there's no denying that if they had gone through the proper process of applying for the funding, they certainly would not have received all the money that they were requesting. So this is trying to be fair. I also just want to quickly say, council simply cannot meet all of the financial needs of the community. And there were many groups in our community who do incredibly valuable work. And if they relied on us to meet all of their shortfalls all of the time, that simply wouldn't be affordable for our ratepayers. So we do have to try and put a fair lens and an objective lens over the requests that are made. And I think this is a way to move forward in a fair way.
Right, councillors, we will now vote on the amendment. Can you all check you've voted, please? And so that has failed, 2 votes for and 11 against. So we'll now go back to the original. So the original option 1 is to fund the request of $14,627 per annum for 2 years. I think there's been sufficient comment on this, so we'll just take the vote. And that is carried, 11 votes in favour, 2 against. So we just need to move to recommendation 2. So recommendation 1 to fund the request has been passed, and we now just need to agree the terms about the Chief Executive negotiates the terms of the 2-year funding agreement with the Palmerston North Surf Life Saving Club.
That they make applications through this strategic priority grant following this grant, rather than that sort of assumes that this is going to be an arrangement, a permanent arrangement going forward, rather than them getting fed back into that SPG process like other groups.
I don't read it that there would be any expectation of ongoing support, because it says that the nature of the support be discussed. It doesn't say that there would or wouldn't be support, but simply that it would be noted to come up for discussion was my understanding. I don't know if staff want to make any comment on that. We'll just ask the Community Development Manager, Steph Velvin, to clarify for us.
Kia ora, thank you. It is because that would come before the next SPG round. So the 10-year plan is the year prior, and then the SPG is the next year after that.
Thank you. Does that answer your
Thank
question,
you.
Councillor?
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay, there's no further comments, so we'll just take the vote. Thank you. And that is carried, 13 votes for and none against. Thank you very much. Right, that now moves us on to item 6, which is a presentation from the Massey University Students Association. And I'd like to welcome Dean Hyde, Head of Operations, Noor Fatima, Lead Advocate, and Michael Tile-Vamour, Manager of Radio Control. Kia ora koutou katoa. So you have 10 minutes for your presentation, as will be indicated by the traffic light system. And just make sure your microphones are all turned on. And then there'll be questions afterwards. So, thanks, Dean. I don't think your microphone's on, sorry.
Now it is. Alrighty. Kia ora, ko Dean Hyde tuko ingoa. I'm Head of Operations for the Massey University Student Association. Just want to acknowledge yourself, Madam Chair, your Worship and Councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. My colleagues to my left here, Dr. Noor Fatima, who is our Lead Advocate, and Michael Tile-Vamour, who's our Manager of Radio Control. They'll be speaking briefly after me. The purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to the Massey University Students Association, better known as MUSA. We've been here since 1928, so a wee while, a significant year coming up very shortly. We are the political representative student body, not only of the student population at the Manawatu campus, but also representing approximately 15,500 students who study online. Literally Invercargill through to the warm north. So what have we traditionally done? I know we certainly, when you often think of student associations, Otago comes to mind, burning couches and rowdy parties. There is a little bit of that goes on, but as a student association we provide much more. We provide services, support and opportunities for our student community. We provide events, not only on campus, and thank you for a number of you who actually came out earlier today, but we also provide events within the city and online. Volunteering opportunities are pretty critical in developing our student community, and we provide those opportunities not only within our own association, but within Radio Control and actually a nationwide network as well. On behalf of Massey University, we actually oversee and manage a variety of affiliated clubs and societies. These range from an alpine club that has been going for about 45 odd years, right through to a Muslim society and everything in between. We provide significant resources for our student community, primarily event-based, but also a lot of coaching in respect to everything from running events to educating their various officers and so forth, and often through peer support, which is really important. We also operate a nationwide class representative system. These are elected student reps who can provide direct input into Massey University via ourselves in regard to the quality of the education experience that they're receiving. We also have on site a convenience shop which does its best to serve the needs of our community. We also are a significant ratepayer here in Palmerston North as well, providing up to 30 modern homes in the city for students to actually rent at a cost lower than the market rate. We provide advocacy services nationwide as well as on campus, and Nor will speak to that shortly. And of course, we have radio control, which Mike will talk about very soon. We have put a copy of our massive magazine. This is a publication that goes right across not only Manawatu campus, but also the Albany and the Wellington campuses as well. A very important expression of the student voice nationally. That's traditionally what we've done. Over this last year, we have also branched out to actually actively advocate and ensure that the student voice is heard locally and nationally. Through the formation of an in-house policy unit, we have made representations to local government of late horizons in regard to bus services, to central government, appearing before several select committees, notably in respect to the exploitation of migrant labour, and the Ministry of Education around their new front of house proposal in regard to international students. From a staffing level, we are actively involved in our local Manawatu community. In fact, Friday we're undertaking, in partnership with Council, a community clean-up in one of the reserves. The reason why we're doing this is that Musa is becoming more active within the wider community. We are an accredited living wage employer. We have partnered with Just Zilch to provide food parcels to students in need, and we are formally partnered with the Manawatu Tenancy Union and Unions Manawatu. Whilst Massey University Manawatu may be our whenua, Musa is proudly asserting its place within the wider Manawatu community. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now defer to my erstwhile colleagues. Over to you.
Kia ora, I am Michael Tile Vamawa. I am Station Manager at Radio Control 99.4 FM up at Massey. We exist as a department of Musa, but we kind of do our own thing. We were established in 1981 as Masca Radio, and then became 2XM Radio Massey on 1269 AM. We were the first FM station in the Manawatu. I believe it was in 1985 on 92 FM, and then eventually moved on to 99.4 FM. Our transmitter that began our FM journey is still there today. It also has started a lot of FM stations around the country, including Energy FM in Taranaki, which ended up forming what we now know as MediaWorks. Our local listenership is around 6,000 during our peak times of breakfast and drive shows. We broadcast terrestrially on 99.4 FM from the Massey campus, and you can reach us on a good day, and depending on how good your car stereo is, or if you stand on top of a hill, you can reach us in Martin and as far as Levin, we've heard. And also we broadcast online 24/7 at radiocontrol.org.nz. We're part of the student radio network of Aotearoa, also established in 1981, have formerly been known as the BNet for a small space of time. And we also, as well as radio, we also produce a lot of video content which we host online at our website and on our Facebook and YouTube channels. We operate on a non-commercial broadcasting licence under the Ministry of Culture and Heritage's guidance, and also in guidelines set out in our Student Radio Network Charter. Essentially that means that we must encourage students to participate in our broadcast. We must provide a training ground for writing and presentation of regions' news and current affairs, also training opportunities for staff and volunteers to progress further in broadcasting. Student Radio Network of New Zealand consists of 5 stations, so we're one of the 2 left that are still within a university space, and that's us and obviously Musa and Otago University Student Association's Radio 1. The remainder of the stations are in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. Essentially with the SRN's charter, we must play a minimum of 40% New Zealand music during our regular broadcast hours. focus on emerging local artists and include students in all of our broadcasting. Our alumni includes a huge list of New Zealand broadcast personalities. Locally, we have Stephen and Jeremy Corbett, John Bridges, and Stephen Joyce began at Radio Control as well, and he went on to create MediaWorks and did a bunch of other stuff. We're working on our second annual Student Radio Network Awards event this November, on the 19th of November. We've just released we've updated our website. We're going to be feeding that with new content. We receive a major amount of our funding from New Zealand On Air Music, which we apply for annually, and MUSA and from Massey University through the MUSA SLA agreement as well. So essentially, through our funding and our charter, it guides us in what we must do. So that essentially is to provide broadcast opportunities for students and promote, basically be the incubator for local and emerging alternative artists. And we currently have 3 employees, full-time employees. We have usually around 5, which we will be filling those roles eventually. We also have 75 volunteers last I checked. I think 40 of those are students and the remainder are from members of our community. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Noor Fatima. I'm the internal student advocate. So in our team we have a total of 2 members. One is a distance advocate, Henri Dreyer, and I'm the internal students advocate. We provide different services to our students, such as like academic support if they are having some issues with their assignments or their supervisors or something like that. So we guide them towards the services. We also guide them through if they are having any tenancy, employment issues, and financial problems. So we have some financial assistance, we call them SAPs, Student Assistance Program, of up to $500 maximum, and food grants of $70 to $100, which they can apply for twice in one academic year, and SAP grant is once per year. And we also have JustSearch that Dean has already mentioned, so we provide about 40 to 50 food bags each week. And yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. That's a huge amount of information that you managed to pack in 10 minutes there. Well done. I'll open up for questions. So we've got a question from Councillor Barrett first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Dean and Michael and Nora, for being here. Could you give us just, I guess, 1 to 3 things, let's say, that you think Council should really focus on in terms of improving the student experience in the city?
Well, we have some really good examples where council have actually been quite proactive in the last few years. So the first thing I would say would be that continued partnership would be appreciated. Mm-hmm. And particularly Moose, for example, partners with a local organisation, Up the Music. So support around events would be excellent. Also, given the work that we're doing in the advocacy space, being able to use or lean on council in regard to opportunities where you may believe the student voice needs to be heard, actually being given a heads up would be helpful, so it's some very practical experience. A third one, any thoughts?
One thing we've been involved in Radio Control is, and Access Manawatu have as well, is putting on the summer concert series, and they've always been really well attended and great for our community. A lot of the bands that we have perform at those events are student age, youth, lots of high school kids and students at university. So I think opportunities like that, we're inviting student age, the youth to come and perform. Things like that would be really cool. I know that when we had those events, it was a few years ago now, I think 2018, 2019, we had around 750 in attendance at each event, and we put on, I think it was 4 events across the city. And we basically gave those students who were in bands a free audience, which is great for them, great for their confidence, and also, giving them a new fan base. So.
Great, thank you. Could I follow up just I guess some of the, things around affordability that, are putting pressure on. What are you hearing from students in that regard, and are their views around this community and what this community might be able to do to first be aware of the affordability challenges that some students face and then perhaps respond to that?
Thank you, Councillor. I've been given the hospital pass on that one. Well, the cost of living challenges, of course, are affecting all of us. For our student community in particular, one of the biggest challenges that the feedback we're getting, which will come as no surprise to you, is accommodation. The next one that tends to come up after that is the cost of transportation, but fortunately we have a very good public service transport here in Palmerston North and Manawatu. So those tend to be the two big ones that come up on our radar. I suppose any consideration would be in regard to council services and events, just being mindful, and I'm sure council will be, that for students in particular, whilst we often joke about living off 2-minute noodles, unfortunately that is a reality. So providing accessibility for students to council services and events at an affordable and reasonable cost would be quite helpful.
Well, thanks again to all three of you. Madam Chair.
Councillor Michelad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two questions. I think some of them have already been teased out by my fellow councillors. You mentioned that you're providing some events around the city. Can you just describe for us what sort of events you've been running around the city, just to bring that awareness?
It would be fair to say that the events within the city environs tend to be music-led. Obviously, COVID's put paid to a lot of what we traditionally did. The last big event we actually held in the square, again in partnership with Up the Music, and that was during Rio Week last year, I think it was, and it was an absolute success. And actually, that is a wonderful example of working with a progressive council to enable an event like that to happen. Our intentions moving forward, 2023, would be to again not only host events on campus, but obviously with a large student community living within the city boundaries, is actually to have regular events in the city as well. We're very keen to break down those invisible barriers between the campus and the city.
Another question. Academic sort of experiences might differ for local and international students. What is it, because during the COVID-19 situation that we had, even from 2020 right onwards, for a lot of international students that decided to stay over, they felt isolated, they felt like they didn't have the support that they needed at the time. What is it that we probably need to do to make sure that we improve their academic sort of experience in Palmerston North and also make them feel part of the community? And what is it that you feel that we're not probably doing well, that we should probably give more attention to?
That's a very interesting question, because when I started in this role, there were several student communities that I immediately identified that we were not serving as best we could. One of those being the international community. One of the first things I did within Musa was to appoint one of my staff with a particular portfolio to focus on the needs and the voice of our international students, and Nora is currently holding that portfolio. The key thing for us, and how council can assist, it's around grounding them within Palmerston North, Manawatu, giving them a reason to be connected and to actually long-term consider staying here. That actually, to be quite frank, is our ultimate goal. It concerns me that we attract some incredibly vibrant, committed people to our community, say thanks very much after completing your PhD, and haere rā. We need to do better. Musa has partnered, for example, with the Manawatu Multicultural Council when we've held a number of events focusing and supporting our international student community. So support from council in regard to, well, for organisations such as MMC and various others, rather than try and reinvent the wheel, would be a key part that you can play.
An additional question, but Madam Chair, supplementary. Is MESI part of the Welcoming Communities program? Because I thought that might be a useful thing for a lot of international students wanting to make Palmerston North home or be part of the community.
I believe the university is, yes.
Okay, cool. No, thank you.
Right, that brings us to the end of the questions. So thank you very much for coming in to talk to us, and I'm sure we've all learned something. And, keep up the good work. I think you're doing a great job. Thank you. I'm happy to move that we receive the presentation for information, seconded Councillor Bowen, and I'll open up if there's any comment. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to briefly comment, MUSA does have an absolutely vital role to play in Massey maintaining a quality place-based educational experience, and that place-based experience is what connects here with the city. And so I'm pleased to hear of plans for strengthening links with the community and ensuring that students have the opportunity to be part, obviously, of the university milieu, but also the wider community, and hopefully beginning to put down roots in this community that keep them here and part of and enjoying this community for a long time. So wish you well in your work. Thanks for presenting to us.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a really important thing that I think has been missed in our conversation is to say thank you for the cups. They're pretty awesome. Like it. Thanks.
I'd just like to say that I think there has been perhaps a gap in student support up until recently, that students really have not been necessarily the focus of the council or the focus of anyone else, really. And so I think it's really good that you're bringing these programmes of work to a higher level, but also that you're partnering with council to try and deliver some of the wellbeings for students. I think it's really important. And having spoken to a number of migrants who've lived in the city for some time, it's very common to hear that they arrive to do postgraduate study at Massey. And the quality of the welcome that they receive seemed to be something that stuck with many of them for a long time. That if they got a really supportive, welcoming start, that it really put a good lens on their experience of Palmerston North and their desire to stay here. So I think you're absolutely on the money with your assessment of where the gaps are and where we can really make a difference, not only for the individuals, but for the community as a whole. So thank you for your work. Great. We will now vote to receive the presentation. And that's carried, 14 votes for and none against. Thank you. Now, item 7 was to have been a presentation from the Nuvaka Trust, but unfortunately we've received an apology from Dana Kunayati, the Nuvaka Trust General Manager, due to sickness. So we will rearrange that for the next committee meeting. So we will now move on to item 8, which is the presentation from Age Friendly Palmerston North. And I'd like to invite Ros Hallam, who's the Secretary, and Raywin Cameron, the Chairperson, to come and present to us. Kia ora korua. Can you just make sure that you've got your microphones on? Should have a green light. And then you'll have 10 minutes according to the traffic light system. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, I'm just going to read my submission because I can't remember it all, but the age-friendly Palmerston North organisation requests that the Palmerston North City Council to start the process of becoming an age-friendly city according to the World Health Organisation criteria as soon as they possibly can. Becoming an age-friendly city is a simple process. Information to assist is available through the New Zealand Ministry of Seniors and the New Zealand Office for Seniors. The first action we ask is for the Palmerston North City Council to join the World Health Organisation Age-Friendly Global Network Community and link into the New Zealand Government Offices for Seniors Age-Friendly Aotearoa New Zealand program. This entitles both these entities both provide examples of activities and guidance and support for civic bodies committed to becoming age-friendly and give access to some of New Zealand government funding for this purpose. From there, it will be easy to develop projects which enable Palmerston North Papeoia to reach its age-friendly potential. The second action requested is for the Palmerston North City Council to include its intentions of becoming age-friendly in the 2023 long-term plan and annual budget and allocate a budget for its success. The World Health Organisation requires 8 areas to be considered when a community is to become age-friendly. These are transport, housing, social participation and respect and social inclusion, outdoor spaces and buildings, civic participation and employment, communication and information, community support and health services. Palmerston North Papeoia is already well on the way to becoming an age-friendly city, but as the process needs to be undertaken by civic bodies, not individual group, it needs the Palmerston North City Council to do the mahi. This means that the council will need to participate with interested groups across the city to produce an age-friendly city plan, put it into action and undertake reviews. We expect that age-friendly Palmerston North will be the group which walks beside the council, assists with consultations with the wider community groups and monitor progress. Thank you.
Ros, did you want to?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Raewyn. I'll open up for any questions at this point. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Raewyn and Rose. I was just interested in, because you said in your presentation that Palmerston North is already on its way to becoming an age-friendly city, and then you said City Council needs to come up on board. So who is responsible for this much work that already has been done? Is it the council or individual organizations, or who do you think has done this work?
Kia ora, Zalfika. Basically, the council has done quite a lot of what makes an age-friendly city. In liaison with other groups around the city, I can think of what's outside Square Edge, for example, that lovely seating that's around there. That's age-friendly. Those kind of things, very simple things, don't cost heaps of money, but great. And you people do the mahi, not us, because we're an advocacy group rather than an actually doing group. But we will be happy to work alongside the council to help them.
Thank you. One more question. And do you have an example of a city declared age-friendly in New Zealand?
Yes. Tauranga, New Plymouth, Hamilton.
Auckland City has their annual plan. They're in the process of their annual plan. Horowhenua was, but we believe they went stopped, but have started the process again. Yeah, and Kapiti. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
It's quite a lot around the country.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Now, I was of the view that we were already an age-friendly city. Perhaps I've got that wrong, but is there another accreditation that we've already achieved? Or am I getting this muddled with something else?
No, to become age-friendly, you have to apply to the World Health Organisation. And I think, to be honest, when we first started about 6 years ago, we thought as a group we could do that, but it is the council that have to make that application, and we support the council. Yeah.
Okay, and those 8 areas that you outlined obviously clearly have a very big overlap with our current goals already.
Yeah.
Are you aware of anything in that area where you perceive there might be a gap that we'd need to lift a service, or at the moment? I mean, obviously we need to wait to go through the process, but do you think there's any area that we would fall short of actually achieving that currently?
Do you want me to speak? Yeah. I don't think we fall short in housing, but for example, but I think that there are things which could be looked at to make housing which is age-friendly. Yeah,
Okay.
that's all I'll say. That's
Okay.
one area I can think of.
Okay, thank you. And just final question, is there a annual contribution that needs to be made for if we sign up for this?
No, I think it's a one-off cost to apply for the to the World Health Organisation.
Oh, yeah. And how much is that, do you know?
No, we don't. I think we have, if you have a project of some sort, you apply to the New Zealand, to the Office for Seniors, and they will tell you how much is available to be used as a putea. Yeah, you just apply to the Office for Seniors, and you talk to them about whatever it is you want done, and there would be something there to assist. I think it's more there to assist with consultation and that kind of thing.
Are you saying there's some financial help from
There is funding. There is some funding available, but not huge funding, I don't think.
Through the Office of
Through
Seniors.
the Office for
yeah.
Seniors. New Zealand, under this government, the government is very friendly towards becoming age-friendly.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
We forgot to add that we do have a letter somewhere from Grey Power supporting this whole age-friendly concept. It's part of their national policy too. But of course, in true form, I have left it behind.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you both for coming in for the presentation. And I'm not sure there's a question for you or a question for council officers, but do we actually have an understanding of perhaps the size of this venture? Because I know the city, we went through Safe City Accreditation 2014, and that was WHO. So, and that was a fairly significant piece of work. So, do we understand the size of the work?
No, I don't think we do understand the size of it, because we haven't applied for the application form itself, because it wasn't us, like we were going to, then realised it was the council that had to do that. I don't think it's huge. I think it's just making sure that you work alongside each other to make sure that the city is age friendly. And I mean, one of the, we often get as a group asked for support, and so one of the things we got asked for about 4 years ago was, could there be seating outside the grocery shops like Countdown and Newborn and that, so that when elderly people or disabled, for that matter, were waiting for taxis or to be picked up, that they had a seat. So we wrote to all of them, and I think we got 90%. There was one that didn't, but everyone supported that and made sure they had seating. Yeah. And another thing we did as a group was when the DHB took away home management from all the elderly people in the city. It was something they did. We got 2 or 3 letters asking if we would support, so we wrote a supportive letter to the DHB to ask, for some elderly people it was the only person they saw week in, week out, And so that, not only because of our letter, obviously, but others, they turned that decision around. So we're there in a supportive role, but also to walk alongside where we can.
But in answer to, I think it's whatever projects you care to do are probably going to be in your long-term plans anyway. And what we would be helping you to do is to just be bringing out for you the older person's perspective. In the same way that you have a senior reference group, you have a disabled person's group, those kind of things. That's part of our job too. I think when you ask about the scope, I can think of my favourite word, footpaths. I can think, those footpaths are going to be a whole lot of work and a whole lot of money and all the rest of it, but you do it step by step, don't you? No pun intended there. So, the budget is not going to be huge for until you look on it as a 10-year plan. It might be huger. That's a terrible answer, isn't it? But I know what I mean.
In short, it would seem that we don't actually know at this point in time sort of how big that is, and I just see a second recommendation coming up on the screen there, which it may very well answer the question in due course. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been some fancy footwork going on over here to get that second recommendation up. Thank you, Ros and Rowan, for coming in to speak to us today. And I think my question is actually probably for an officer, or maybe. Rowan's presentation had quite a number of requests for activity that might come in advance of the recommendation that's here. And I wondered if we were able to get an officer comment on whether that recommendation enables the activities that Raewyn was suggesting in her presentation.
Through you, Madam Chair. I think that there are it's probably two parts to that question. If there are activities that are already existing or that can continue within the current business as usual activity, that shouldn't actually hold that up. But if there's new activity that's associated with becoming an age-friendly, then it would actually fold into that recommendation for consideration of resources through the long-term plan.
Thank you for that. Thank you, ladies.
Right, there are no more questions, so thank you very much, Rowan and Ros, for your presentation. And
Thank you.
We'll now discuss.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. So, councillors, we've got the original recommendation that the presentation be received for information, and then I've proposed that the request from Age Friendly Palmerston North for either to council or maybe not even to Age Friendly, how to progress this becoming an age friendly city. And so council has endorsed the plan of Age Friendly Group for us to become an age friendly city, but we've never put in any resources, any programme, any plan for how we might contribute to that, other than, as Ros commented on, the incidental things that we are doing that just happen to be age friendly. So I think in order to progress this, we really need to, when we're next doing a consideration of budgeting for the longer term, think about how this might be brought forward. And although the next long-term plan might seem a little way off, discussions on it are going to begin, early next year. And I think indicating that we want to consider this will enable staff to make an assessment of what resource might be required in order to do it and bring that forward. So I think if we do want to try and progress this, at least to the point of knowing what we need to do and how much it might cost, then I think this is the way to do it. So I'd encourage you to support this. Thank you. Councillor Bowen, did you want to speak to this as a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm having some technical issues here with my machine, which just says talk now, so I'll just take that instruction. Happy to support this recommendation both to receive the presentation and thank you both for coming in and speaking today, and also to see this referred to the long-term plan. There is clearly some machinery that we need to get involved with here to get this over the line, and that seems to be a sensible way to go ahead. My support for the age-friendly concept is because this is about our city being friendly for all ages. And that's a really strong theme that comes across when you do a little bit of the reading about what age-friendly is, that this isn't about older people on their own. This is about what it takes to build a livable city. And so this aligns really well with our goals of being connected and safe, but also creative and exciting, although that might be a slightly longer bow that I'm drawing there. So happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also really happy to support both of these recommendations. And I think using these kinds of tools is a really good opportunity to just check that we're doing everything we can to deliver on the goals that we want to be an inclusive city. And as Councillor Bowen's already pointed out, the things that we can do to make an age-friendly city is also going to benefit the wider community. And I see some definite overlaps between the needs of people with disabilities in our community and the needs of those who are senior in our community. And I think it would be really good if there's good communication, and I'm sure officers will be on top of this, but across some of those pieces of work that are already happening. And I think, for example, Program 2041, which is the accessibility assessment, and a report on that is scheduled to come here to this committee in December this year. And that certainly would be of interest, I think, to those who are pursuing an age-friendly city as well. So all of what has been talked today aligns really well with all of our strategies and goals, so I think this makes a lot of sense to progress this.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I too support the recommendations there. I think this request is very well deserved, and I think we do need to give some direction. I think it's that third or fourth time you've been here, and it's a polite request too. So I need to acknowledge that, because sometimes others thump the table and say we must do it. As society ages, we've got to look to the future on how we can help certain sectors, and I've seen the great work that other cities like Hamilton and Tauranga have done, but also Horowhenua, who have engaged with their older population really, really well. But we already do a lot of this work, and it's really about packaging up things together around transport, Ros's footpaths, housing, social inclusion, and that's really important. That's the glue that makes people feel connected and safe. Spaces, when we're building things, when we're doing outdoors, we've got to think about how people move around, how they may want to take a moment to sit down somewhere, and that general health and community support. So this isn't something we should be afraid of. Yes, we've been through the Safe City and the Welcoming Communities programs, and they can be resource hungry, but actually I think it's for the better of our city and our people, so I don't think we should be afraid of that. As I said, I do think we're already doing some of this. It's really packaging it together. And you've come and asked many times, so I think we should give some direction. I support it. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I think the second part of this recommendation is a sensible approach. 2014, we went through the WHO Safe City accreditation process, and that was really about collecting, collating, and then sort of presenting information to ensure that we actually met all the requirements of the accreditation. So there will be many strands to this, and of course, hence my question about sort of trying to sort of figure out the size of what this might actually entail for council. So the second part of this recommendation is absolutely on the money. And of course, our projections in terms of our demographics just makes this make an awful lot of sense. So very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly supportive of the direction here. It's actually come as a bit of a surprise to me that things weren't already in process, so it's really, I appreciate the efforts that you, Roz and Raywin, and those around you have made to bring this to us multiple times until the penny has dropped and we understand what is now needed. So very much in support of this. Madam Chair, I would ask if it is possible, either hopefully informally, to indicate that we would be applying to the World Health Organization to become, so that it is clear for members of the community reading this recommendation that that application would go to the World Health Organization to become an age-friendly city. I don't think that's substantive in nature.
I'm happy to put that in. Seconder is happy.
Thanks. I hope the drive that we really get out of this is of course to address some of those physical infrastructure type things, like your footpaths. But really, for me, it's about that social connectivity and means to combat the epidemic of loneliness that is actually quite prevalent, especially in those age demographics, and making sure that this is a city where people do feel a sense of connection, because we know that sense of connection is absolutely foundational to well-being in those senior years of life. So, yeah, very supportive of this direction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. There are no further comments. I don't think I need a right of reply, so we will just go to the vote. And those recommendations are carried, 14 votes for and none against. Thank you. So we will move on to item 9, which is the confirmation of the minutes. And councillors, I'll just indicate that after we've confirmed the minutes, I intend to break for afternoon tea, just so that you prepare yourselves. So, I'm happy to move that the minutes of the Community Development Committee meeting of the 8th of June 2022, Part 1 Public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. Seconded, Councillor Bowen. Are there any corrections? No, we will go to vote then, please. And that is carried, 12 votes for, none against and 2 abstentions. So we will take a break now and come back, resume the meeting at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
community. Across the board, we can see that COVID restrictions continued to impact last year, and we had a good diversity of applications across the board as well. Of note was the Resource Recovery Fund, which was a new fund this last year that was successful in allocating their full budget. And notable also is the SPG round for 22 to 25 that was run, despite being impacted by COVID lockdown and part of the advertising and applications being open part. The team innovated really to promote the fund in different ways. So there were online drop-in sessions and videos made and things like that. And we received a good number of applications, including 30 new applicants. This was the second time the SPG program has been implemented, and it was felt during the process and in the review with the panel afterwards that there could be opportunities to improve the process and outcomes if the scope and structure were reviewed. I'll just note that we've got a number of representatives from other divisions here who have contributed to the report and are able to answer questions about their specific grants as well.
Thank you, Steph. Just a couple of questions from me to start. The first one is about the SPG recommendations. So for the second recommendation there, when you're talking about the scope and the structure, is that just around whether or not the priorities should be ranked within the SPG, or whether or not there should be sub-envelopes, as was discussed in the report, or is it wider than that?
Yeah, it's looking at those types of things. So I guess overall, is there a way that this could be structured differently, or the scope could be narrowed or widened, I guess, to better achieve outcomes with the investment?
Okay, thank you. And then the other question was just about the Community Small Grants Fund. I just wondered how long the maximum application of $5,000 has been in place. It seems to have been a maximum of $5,000 for quite some time.
I'm not sure when that originated, but it was discussed during the support and funding policy review earlier this year and confirmed at 5,000, I believe.
Okay, but we don't know how long, excuse me, how long it might have been at 5,000.
No, it was definitely that in the last policy, in the 2018 policy as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, questions from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Steph. I'm sure others will have questions, so I'll just focus on mine on my particular areas of interest. But to start, in the overview, you list the grants that are included. Clearly, all of our sports community funding is not included there. Why is that separated out from this report?
That's reported on separately through the Sport Manawatu 6-monthly report and annual report, so it wasn't felt that it needed to be included again here.
So I'll leave that for comment. In 314, you're talking about, scrolling, the Major Events Fund, and you talk about locally focused events will be asked to apply to more appropriate funding avenues. And I suppose I read that in the context of this report, all of our other appropriate funding avenues are already hopelessly oversubscribed. So how will that work if we're just trying to move funding around?
There is some opportunity within the new Community-Led Initiatives Fund. So that's grouped together 3 previous funding streams. So there's a bit of wriggle room in there. So that would be one option, or looking externally for other funders as well.
Thank you. And then just going back onto the SPG funding, where you talk about the sector leads, which we've just agreed would be take place that trial this year. It says the success of the Sector Leads trial be reported on separately in the new year, which seemed a very quick time frame for assessing the success of a trial that's only just started. So what's the thinking behind doing that so quickly?
So probably later next year, sort of November, December, in the interest of having some information provided for the 10-year plan process.
Right, okay, thank you, that's useful. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steph. Just checking in with the sector lead organisations, I assume that they are now funded under this new arrangement for those 7 organisations?
Yeah, so they've got, special contracts, special agreements called partnership agreements, but the amount that they were funded is the same as they would have received if they were an SPG recipient. So there was no impact on the total pool spent for this last round that's been set up.
Great, thank you. That answers the question. The second part of the question, that's really good. And just in terms of the community-led initiatives fund, there's an underspend on that. Is that going to be reallocated? Any comment on that? I think the report says there was an underspend for the community-led initiatives fund.
That's possibly a technical budget question. Finance.
We could get that answer to you later on, Councillor Hancock.
That's fine. Okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steph.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steph. Really great report. Just had a couple of questions around the Resource Recovery Fund. And I guess firstly, just to understand, you indicated, or the report indicates, that uptake was lower than expected. And I just wondered kind of how much uptake was expected and how that expectation was set.
Just invite the resource recovery team down to answer that question.
Well, thank you.
That's right.
Over the years, I've had a lot of inquiries from a lot of organisations to put a fund forward. So when we actually finally put a fund forward, we had an expectation of quite a lot of people applying. So we were quite surprised that we only got 11. Sorry, Melissa actually managed the process, so she's probably better to answer the more technical questions about how many people applied. But that was why we had put that in there, because we did have a high expectation that would be more.
Great, thank you. So did you have then a bit of a database of all those groups and were able to reach out to them directly, or was it more of a generic advertisement to the community?
It was more generic, but we did put some communications out. I think we put a Facebook post out from memory. You're asking me for something that happened a little while ago. I think we also did let people like Environment Network Manawatu and groups that we work with quite, that have regular contact with, we let them know about them too.
Great, thank you. And just, is that fund constrained in terms of only funding things on a 12-monthly basis, or is it possible for kind of longer-term projects to be set in place through that fund?
At the moment, it is constrained to 12 months process, but we can certainly review that when we review, because we're looking to review the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, of which that fund kind of came out of an action within that plan. So when we review that plan, we can certainly bring that up in terms of even how much we allocate, how much we make available, and also how the longevity of the funding round.
Great, thank you. Is there an accountability report that goes to MFE for that, given that it's kind of their money in a way?
So yes, every year we report through what they call the TOR list system. So through the system that the MFE have created, so we report on how we spend our total spend of the Waste Minimisation Fund money levy that we receive. Yes, we do.
Great, and that's a matter of public record that can already be found by the public, or is that?
That is a very good question. I do not know the answer to that question. I can certainly find out from the MFE and come back to you.
Great. Thanks, Natasha. Appreciate it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha. So just a question from me. Do you, taking a sort of an overview of all of the funds that we've got, do you see that there's any gaps anywhere? Do you think that we've got the right mix of community funds to enable the strategic direction of council? I know it's a big kind of overview question, and whereas this is just a report on the different funds, but I just wonder, it's helpful to see them all together, but are you aware of any gaps or areas in which we might need to think about changing things going forward?
That is a very big question. I think overall we have a good range of offerings. We certainly are, to my knowledge, a generous council in terms of the grant funding that we have available for the community. If I was to be given $1 million and need to put it somewhere, I would put it into the strategic priority grants. That's our most in-demand fund because it is the most sustainable funding option for community groups. So I guess that's part of the answer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So there are no further questions, I don't think so. Thank you, Stephanie, for your report. I'm happy to move the recommendations that the committee receive the report titled Summary of Community Funding Allocations from 1st July 2021 to 30 June 2022 for information, and also that Council consider the scope and structure of the Strategic Priority Grants Programme during the development of the Long-Term Plan 2024 to 2034. Seconded Councillor Bowen, and I will open up for any comment. And Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I asked the question about sports funding, not because I particularly have an issue with the amount of funding that goes to sport, but that the direction for this report is Council wishes to see an annual overview of all community funding. And there doesn't seem to be a place where all of that comes together, which in itself might not matter until we get into the debate about major events funding, which is clearly under pressure. And the suggestion is that we'll look at other local sources of funding, part of which picture is our own community funding arrangements. So the 5 successful major events from last year, 2 of those were in arts, 2 of them were in, well, I've said sports, and 1 was other, which is rural games, which could also maybe be sports. I don't know what that even is really. So it seems to me that we need to be able to join this conversation up, because if we're pushing events back down into the community funding pool without a clear overview of what that community funding pool is, then we don't have the right information in front of us to make those decisions. I support our major events fund. I support the very clear direction that's giving for large-scale events that drive economic benefit. And if the events that are sitting there don't do that, then they shouldn't be major events. But that then asks the question about where that funding comes from, and does Council have the right quantum of funding in the right buckets? And that's the conversation I think we need to have, especially heading into the LTP. And this report doesn't quite get us there for my money, although it is a very good report at what it does provide, which is the overview of funding that is in the community, social, arts, cultural space. But that sports element is a missing link for me there to get a full picture. So I'll have a think about how we think about that in future. Thanks.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly endorse Councillor Bowen's comments. I found the report very useful, though, for what it did bring together, and it's extraordinary when you actually look at the breadth of support and activity that goes out right across the community. And I think a tremendous amount of work would have gone from the team into seeing that these grants were allocated in a fair and accountable way. And I really feel like this pulls together something that I would see as the foundations of a really good news story for council to really be communicating out to the community about the breadth of what we are doing to support community activity across all the well-beings, and create a bit more community awareness, I think. I mean, we heard a little bit about in the Resource Recovery Fund how there might have been some gaps there in community awareness around a new fund, but I think just a general community awareness, both for those seeking funds, but also those wanting to understand where their rates are actually going and how they're being fed back into good community outcomes. There's a good news story in here, and it'd be great to see that elevated for the community's awareness. Just reading through is truly extraordinary to see what's being delivered and achieved across the community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And it's really just a matter of, I guess the question I asked just around sort of the budget and the community-led initiatives fund was actually at the top of page 34. We had a budget of 159,915, but allocated only 81,738. So it would be good to actually just get some information in terms of that underspend and whether or not that can be reallocated. And I guess I echo perhaps the view of council officers that the SPG is heavily oversubscribed and potentially underfunded, so hence the direction of travel in terms of my questioning. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, just a comment from me, a thank you to staff, because I know that there's a tremendous amount of work that goes on liaising with community organisations to help them with their applications for funding, then to assess those applications, and then to make sure that the accountability is negotiated and also that it's helpful. And certainly when we get this level of detailed reporting, it's really reassuring that the money that goes to community funding is well allocated, that the different strategic priorities of council are being addressed through the spending of the money, and that there's significant community benefit. And we know that for many of these organisations, if not all, that we're funding, you know, $1 from council is going to give us a lot more than $1's worth of value because of the number of volunteers that are working in organisations and providing their time for free. So there's a tremendous amount of community good and environmental, cultural and economic and social well-beings being achieved through this funding, and I think it's tremendous. So congratulations to the team for all the work, and well done for a very detailed report. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry I'm jumping in late, but yeah, look, thank you to the officers too. I think it's quite comprehensive. See, it's 2.4 million a year, and I think per capita we'd be right up there in terms of funding our various sectors. I think all of the funds except one, I believe, have been well thought out. They are some, like the Strategic Priorities Grant and the Creative Communities Scheme, are mature, and they've got a great level of rationale behind them. I still question the Major Events Fund, and this is, you know, in all seriousness, its funding levels are too low, if we're being really truthful. Capping it at 30,000, I can see us having just about nearly all of these people back into the chamber at some level, and just want to signal that's one area which we need some quite significant work, and also some engagement with true major event promoters. But other than that, I think everything else is looking really good, and I think it's been good to bring it all together, because sometimes you'll have an organisation that will go into one bucket, and then all of a sudden you realise they're in another bucket as well. And that has happened the occasional time, and that's no disrespect to officers and the organisations, it's just been available to them. But this actually brings it all together quite nicely. But just signalling that we do have some headwinds coming at us around major events, and if we do want to be in that space at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, no further comments, so we will go to vote and we'll take the two recommendations together. And that is carried, 13 votes for, none against, and no abstentions. Okay, so that brings us to item 11, which is the presentation of Community Places Research Report and recommendations. I'd like to invite Julia MacDonald to come and present.
Kia ora koutou, thank you very much. Ko Julie MacDonald, tōku ingoa. I just want to make a couple of comments briefly before I hand over to Tracy. I want to introduce Julie Keane, Stacey, Julie Keane as well from Third Bearing, but I'll hand to Stacey in a moment to do a brief reminder of where this has come from and the findings. So I'm really delighted to present this piece of work. Councillors will recall that this was an idea that came through the 10-year plan discussions as you were grappling with those lots of discussions about how do you deal with requests for community facilities and ideas throughout the city. I think a relatively modest provision was made for this piece of work through the 10-year plan, and I'm really thrilled with how much progress has been able to be made. And I would just also note that one of the things we've really noted is the benefit that has been had from having a local consultant firm working on this. The handful of people involved from Third Bearing have all got really good connections in the city, and it's really shone through the work, and I want to thank them for that, and also to the large number of staff and community members, of course, who have contributed to it. So I'll hand to Stacey. Thank you.
Kia ora anō e te kaunihira, Stacey te ringa ko au kai tātari kaupapa here e mahi ana. Good afternoon again, Stacey Solomon, Policy Analyst. I'd also like to welcome Julie to the table here with us. Thank you for coming.
Stacey, sorry to interrupt. Can I just get you to pull your mic a bit closer? I'm just struggling to hear.
Of course.
Thank you.
Council will recall through the 2021-31 10-year plan, including a project for a citywide stocktake and needs assessment of community facilities. That project was included, and it was intended to enable council to respond in a coordinated and sustainable way to the increasingly frequent requests we are receiving from our hapori here in Papaiaoia for either new community facilities or a change in provision to the current community facilities. The Community Places Report is a first step towards responding to planning to requests from the community, and it is comprised of two different parts, the first being the stocktake, which has compiled and mapped a list of over 600 community facilities in Palmerston North. The second part of that is the needs assessment, which has been made up of a combination of data from the last three censuses, current council plans, strategies and policies, as well as information obtained from stakeholder engagement with over 30 identified stakeholders in our community. The report then further provides a series of recommendations, which are for the most part able to be separated into two different themes. The first being ways that council can maximise current provision available in the city, and the second being things to consider when council is making decisions for community facility provision in future and how these may inform 10-year plan discussions. With that, I'll invite any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll open up for questions. Mr. Mayor, were you still in the queue from last time, or? No, your question. Okay.
Kia ora, thanks for your report. Could I mean, lots of things on the maps here. Is there a legend? I mean, it's quite small. I don't know what they are. Some are blue, some are brown, some are purple. Is there a legend somewhere that's been missed from the report?
Possibly it hasn't been included in the paper version of the report. However, each of these maps has been mapped online.
Right.
So they are available there, and there is a legend included in that.
Could we see a PDF or something of that where the legend is? Because I think
Yes,
the
there are.
maps become quite well. They don't. You can't read them without the legend.
Of course. There are links available on page 8 of the report.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Mayor? Yeah. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Stacey. Great report, really found a lot of useful content here. I guess I'd be interested in getting a sense of what, by way of time frames and resources, would be needed to give effect to the recommendations that sit there. Is that work already in train, and would it be coming to us naturally, or would we need to specifically request to understand timeframes and resource requirements?
Thank you for your partai. Some of them, you'll note that the recommendations for further work possibly could be delivered over the course of work that is already being done around the business, particularly in the spaces where we have officers who have those connections already with different community facilities or community centres that council either supports or operates. For the remaining recommendations, to answer your question, no, they aren't in train, but we do envisage that they would support future discussions for the upcoming 10-year plan.
Thank you. So I guess from an officer's point of view, would it be a logical step to ask for some visibility around timeframes and resource requirements so that we could, at this table, also have some awareness in that space?
Thank you, Councillor. This alludes to something that Councillor Johnson has raised earlier too, as to how we make sure this remains visible so that it doesn't just disappear. The second recommendation here, that it's guidance for community future decision making, I guess we would see this as a trigger for all these recommendations being taken into quite some considerable depth into discussions towards the 10-year plan. So I can imagine, for example, a workshop with councillors where we present the detail, we click around the maps and have a good discussion about all the recommendations and make sure that the pieces of work that need to be identified for the future do actually get planned. We're happy to sort of report back in each of those, but we would see this piece of work informing a great deal of the work that council is doing over time, whether it's facility development of current facilities or future planning work or requests from the community or a number of things. So I think by assuming if the recommendations are adopted, we would see that having quite a high visibility as we begin in the next 10-year planning phase.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just a question from me. Were there any surprises to you in this report? Was there anything unexpected that it showed up?
For me, there wasn't anything unexpected. Julie may be able to speak more to feedback given from our stakeholders during engagement, but nothing particularly surprising.
Okay, cool.
Kia ora. I would agree with Stacey's view on that. We didn't necessarily find anything surprising other than the willingness of the engagement probably was the one thing that we were really, really excited about because the community was so interested in this piece of work. So
it was a surprise for us that our engagement was as thorough and as well thought through with the engagement from the community. So yeah, but other than that, there were no surprises from we weren't expecting that perspective.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. I see there's no one else in the queue. Are there any further questions? No? Well, that's an indication of a very thorough report. So thank you very much, and we'll go to the debate. So I'm happy to move the recommendations that Council receive the Community Places Stocktake and Needs Assessment, Attachment 1 for information, and that Council endorse the recommendations made in the Community Places Stocktake and Needs Assessment Attachment 2 as guidance for future decision-making on community facilities in Palmerston North. And I just see an additional recommendation from Councillor Barrett going through. Has that gone through to administrators as well? Yep, so that the additional recommendation is that the CE report on timeframes and resource requirements to give effect to the recommendations in the Community Places Stocktake and Needs Assessment. That's moved by Councillor Barrett and seconded by Councillor Beattie. Did you want to make any comment on that third recommendation? Need to see it? Yeah, okay. Just give us a minute till that comes up. That's it there, actually, if you want to. Yes, officers are happy with that recommendation as it stands. So, did you want to speak to your recommendation first, Councillor Barrett? Your additional recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to speak to it briefly. This is an incredibly valuable report that's been brought to us, and a lot of work has actually gone into assembling this. This is incredibly comprehensive and broad in scope, and is going to be very important, I think, for informing decision-making in the future. For me, looking at that list of recommendations, I had a little bit of trouble sort of differentiating between the things that might already be in train and things that might need more resource or decisions to support them. I think this report, whether it comes to a workshop or whether it comes to a committee, it's open-ended in that regard. This report would help us just begin to parse that out a little bit as we travel towards the long-term plan process. So my hope would be that this would be able to be delivered in a time, should the recommendation be supported, that we would inform our 10-year plan activities in this 10-year plan cycle, and given the nature of the report, it's probably over multiple 10-year plan cycles, to be honest. So I'd ask for your support so that we have good visibility and awareness around a very important piece of work for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open up for comments on all of the recommendations, if people would like to make comment. So just from my own perspective, I was really, really impressed with the standard of this report. I must say it was outstanding, and it provided comprehensive, in-depth detail on community places. It was extraordinarily well. The collaboration with stakeholders was extraordinarily good. It was, yeah, I mean, I'm honestly a bit lost for words. It was so good. But I do want to put it on record because this level of reporting is a step up, definitely a step up. And it will be so useful for future decision-making around 10-year plan budgets and around decisions that we might make for facilities for the community going forward. So thank you very much to those who are involved. It's a brilliant piece of work. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree. I'm just looking at some of the lists here, and the stakeholder engagement is massive, and just about every sector that you can think of, actually, within the city. And I agree with the recommendations there, because it does help us with some research-based decision-making. Just an example is the swimming pools. There's 36 swimming pools in Palmerston North. So when people come running at us, there's not enough pools. It's quite interesting. Admittedly, 29 of them are associated with schools, but there's still 36 swimming pools in Palmerston North. Incredible. Who knew that? Thank you.
Okay, there's no further comment. Did you want a right of reply, Councillor Barrett?
My apologies on behalf of both the Mayor and Councillor Beattie. I missed that.
There are no further comments. Would you like a right of reply on your additional recommendation?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, in which case, if everyone's happy, we'll take all three together.
Madam Chair, have you got a seconder for the first two recommendations?
Oh, okay, yes, thank you. Sorry, I've missed that. Yeah, Pat will second. All right, we'll go to vote. Thank you. And that is carried, 14 votes for, none against and no abstentions. So that brings us on to the last item today, which is the committee work schedule, item 12. I'll pass over to the Assistant Chief Executive if she wants to make any comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only comment I will make is on the item progress and outcomes of Programme 2041, accessibility assessment, just to give you an update on the shift of date there to December. So an external organisation's been engaged to undertake the accessibility review for council-owned infrastructure, and so that review of council-owned buildings has commenced. And that commenced in June and is progressing to programme, and that will be due for completion around March 2023. And the same organisation will progress on to their wider council-owned infrastructure. So that's why the update has actually moved to December.
Okay, are there any questions on the work schedule? No? Okay, well, I'll move that we receive the work schedule dated August 2022. Seconded Councillor Bowen, and we will vote, please. And that is carried, 14 votes for and none against. So that brings us to the end of the Community Development Committee meeting. And since it's the last meeting of this term, I'd just like to thank the Deputy, Councillor Bowen, for her support, and also the governance team for their excellent support, and staff of the Community Development team and Assistant Chief Executive for stepping in the acting role. And it's been a pleasure to be part of it. So, nō reira, ina mana, ina reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you.